So nice to meet the two of you. Listen, we're very excited to talk about all of the great things that you're doing, and I want to hear more about your story. But, with Banned Books Week upon us, Paul, especially, I wanted to chat with you first about this. So you've got this amazing line of kids' books, youth books that you have put out. You have illustrated them, you wrote them. Recently, one of them you found out, unfortunately, was banned and kind of returned. Tell me a little bit about that situation, and then I promise we'll talk about some more fun stuff too.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. We're so glad to be here. See how I slipped that in? Glad to be here.
So glad to be here. There we go.
I'm sure I'm the first one to do that. No, it's an honor. Yeah, so I'm a children's book author and illustrator. I have 2 books out now, a third on the way. It sounds like I'm talking about our children, which is actually appropriate because the second book is about adoption, and it's about different kinds of families with 2 moms and 2 dads and sort of different types of families, which I feel is so important that it be represented in children's literature. Sometimes in ways that aren't super direct either. They're just sort of consequential or incidental, rather, to the story, which I think is just important because, kids nowadays really need to see that kind of representation, whether or not they have that sort of family or their friends do. It's just more and more common. And so I think that needs to be reflected in the literature that kids are consuming as well from a young age. So I have this second book, The Secret Ingredient. And this year we've been doing more bookstore visits, signing events, and things like that. And we did one at Barnes & Noble in April. We did another one at Charlie's Queer Books here in Seattle in June. And then right around the same time, there was a third bookstore arranging a similar event. And we got an unusual email after a few weeks of silence after sending them all the product. I hadn't heard from my contact. And out of the blue, we get this email, a person who I hadn't had any contact with before, saying that the person who placed the order and arranged the event wasn't entirely up to speed with the bookstore's policies, and they're returning the books. So, of course, I called and asked, what were these policies? I wanted to really understand what was going on because nothing like this had happened before. And she simply said that the message didn't align with the bookstore itself, without explicitly saying what that message was. But I could really only surmise one such message, being that it represented gay families. I was pretty devastated, to be honest, because it was Pride Month and I had everything had been going so well. And while there is definitely some pushback from parts of the world online when we talk about our books, I mean, we definitely see those comments. We know there are people that don't agree that this kind of representation should exist. But I obviously had felt that this bookstore was excited to host us and was excited about the message. So I was really, really surprised. And that's when I shared that email. I shared the experience of getting that message on our TikTok page and our Instagram page via my screen reader reading it to me. Side note, I've lost over 90% of my vision to a disease called retinitis pigmentosa. So I'm doing all of this with very little vision, but it's my passion. So when we got that email and I shared it, the thing really blew up. The video went viral and got a lot of attention. What was amazing was those 100 books that were returned were like immediately snapped up by supportive followers and then some. So some real good came out of it. I saw it almost immediately as an opportunity to talk about censorship. And I looked into the definition. I said, what just happened to us if a message contradicts a store's policies and they remove it from the shelf? Because from what I understand, it was already on display. This constitutes as a ban because banning includes school reading lists, libraries, and bookstore shelves. And I thought, this is a kind of banning that I don't hear a lot about because it's a nature of censorship that can be very easily underreported because a bookstore gets to just have whatever book they want on their shelves. There is no requirement.
And Matthew, for you, what was it like to see something that your husband, Paul, put so much effort and heart into, but also that the messages in the book and the themes are important to you as well? What was it like for you to kind of see this happening? Because like he said, they took away the right of someone to get access to this book, to make the choice to want to read it or to purchase it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad. It's a reminder of how important it is for advocacy work still to be done. And I mean, that's exactly what GLAAD is doing. That's what Paul's trying to do through his books. Sometimes it's easy to forget that there are people out there that actively are trying to practice discrimination and silence diversity. So it was just another wake-up call, another reminder that there's still so much work to be done.
And this question can be for both of you or either of you, for thinking about the ban, that unfortunately meaning some people not getting access to this book. What's the hope that you want people that do find this book and that do read it to take away from it?
Well, I mean, the book really is just about that kind of representation for the queer community. I hope that people understand that whether your child is part of a queer family or not, this is the kind of literature I think that all children should be allowed to consume. It's very wholesome.
I mean, the message of the book, The Secret Ingredient, is what are the ingredients to a successful, happy family? And their creativity, love,
courage,
and
patience.
Yeah,
that's what it's
so
really
it's
about.
It's a universal message about what makes all families strong and what makes them work.
And my first book, The Pengrooms, is also just about teamwork, and it's about what makes a great relationship. It's about working as a team. And
again, a universal message for all relationships.
And I feel like while it's really important that we have literature out there that has a strong message, like if I go way back, we go back to like Heather Has Two Mommies. That was a landmark book, right? That really talked about a diverse family with two moms. But I'm really interested in creating books that, again, that representation is incidental to the story and the messages of the story are relatable to every child, not just children of queer parents, because I feel it's really important at this stage to move beyond the quote message books and become really focusing on universal themes, but also just so happen to have queer representation in there too. And it's not beating anybody over the head. And I think that's important because I think ultimately you will reach more people, help really normalize and familiarize people with these types of families and the LGBTQ plus community.
Well said. I mean, have you thought about if, when the two of you were kids, if you had access to your own books, of what that would have been like for you to read when you were younger?
Oh, absolutely. It's really the impetus for having created them.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote and illustrated these books, these passion projects for my younger self. I created them for little Paul and little Matthew. I was thinking about us, right? And then eventually, by extension, just everybody who was able to get them, and hearing back from the families who love them and the kids who fall asleep clutching them. And we get pictures of the kids taking them to bed, and we have a plushie, and they're snuggling with the plushie with the rainbow bow tie. And it warms our hearts. But really, I created them because it was something I desperately wish that I had been able to see and be part of my collection as a child.
Yeah, I think we need both types of books. We need the message books, and we need the books where the queer characters are incidental to the story. Because as a kid, if I had just seen more just normal representation around me, that would have normalized what I was experiencing, in addition to the really strong message books.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's all about. Representation is so important, and that's what we're doing every day. I'm glad to make sure that these stories are out there. Let's go back to the beginning, as Hillary Duff says. Because I think about where, the reason why, when this story happened, you have such a presence and so many followers, that it was able to draw attention to really, what's going on, which is so wonderful. But like, for anyone that hasn't seen your amazing content, when did this happen? Because I know you've been married for a couple years, but when did it really start to all just happen and gain the momentum on TikTok and obviously on Instagram and beyond? Because we're talking about millions of people watching your amazing pranks, your funny but heartfelt, conversations about, the relationship. I think it's like something that so many of us can connect to. But yeah, I'd love to hear just a little bit of how it all kind of got to here.
Well, we had been doing social media for a couple years. And it was October 2022 when, for the very first time, we decided to share more of our lives as an interabled couple. So while we had talked about Paul's retinitis pigmentosa, the fact that he's legally blind, he's lost over 90%, probably 95% of his vision. We hadn't spoken about it directly. So it was October 2022 when I started a video by saying my husband is blind and these are some things I do to help him out around the house. And that really took off, and in a way that surprised us. So we really started to lean into what it was like to be an interabled couple. And that included pranks, because I'm a natural prankster, but being married to someone with sight issues makes it so much easier to prank. There are such funny pranks that you can do to someone who has difficulty seeing. And I like to preface that none of my pranks are mean. No one gets hurt, nothing gets damaged. And I would never prank Paul if he didn't enjoy them, if they didn't make him laugh. And if I hadn't found out after the very first time that it was something he wanted me to continue. So with his blessing, I've continued those. All of that is a way of showing to the world that all relationships require compromise, being there for each other physically, mentally, emotionally. Our relationship has a very visual example of how I am there for Paul and what I can do to accommodate for him. But even if you're a relationship without a physical disability, you still have to be there for your partner. You still have to make compromises. You still have to balance each other out.
And just to expound on that a little bit, we're a queer couple and we're an interabled couple. So we're representing these different sort of segments of life. But because, like Matthew so eloquently said, we sort of represent any ordinary couple in a way, even though we have these things that make us stand out a little different, people can relate to us because everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. I don't think people see us as Matthew and Paul, the gay couple, or Matthew and Paul, the disabled couple. I think ultimately what they've come to realize is like, oh, just Matthew and Paul. I love that family. I love that connection they have. And that's just from a lot of feedback we've gotten. What's really interesting is, and Matthew didn't mention, this was sort of like we started our social media journey as a pandemic project because we didn't have much else to do. And as that grew, and like Matthew said, we really started to lean into our dynamic as an interabled couple, things really blew up, such that when we go out and travel the country, people that normally would never had came up to us before during our first 2 years of sharing our lives, segments of the population that really surprised us, conservative like dads come up and say, hey, I'm normally not really supportive of LGBT people, but I love you guys and I'm proud of you. And like, you've changed the way I think about gay couples. That just blew our minds. It was like we were reaching new people.
True story. That happened in a bagel shop in New York City.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's been a pretty incredible journey.
That's amazing. And I mean, it's incredible that, that's what it's being able to reach, like you said, an audience and a group of people that maybe, like you said, thought an LGBTQ or a gay couple was something. And they said, actually, you made me realize it's not at all what I thought. So that's really, really amazing. What is next for the two of you? I know we have a book coming, but what else do we want to take on? I feel like the opportunities are endless at this point.
Yeah, well, Paul has his third book, The Adorescope's coming out, which is a field guide to the 12 astrological signs as these cute little tiny woodland creatures. That will be released soon. He has a fourth book and a fifth book in the works.
Wow.
I've seen the preliminary work for both of those. The fourth book is based on his blind robot comic, which you can see on our Instagram. It's going to flesh out that whole story in a very fun way.
Yep.
Paul's big dreams is to turn all of his books into animated series or animated movies. So we're heading down to Lightbox Expo in Pasadena in October.
Next month.
And hoping to connect with some animators or animation studios and turn the Pringle and Finn into a little series.
An animated series. That is the big dream. And to take that same incidental representation that we've been talking about and take that into the animation space. That's kind of the big pie in the sky goal right now.
Well, put it out there, make it happen. I have confidence in you both. That's exciting.